What's up, everybody? I'm super stoked to be here, and I probably shouldn't be as excited as I am, but I am, because I got a new plant, and I tell you, it doesn't even matter how many years go by. I continue to be excited about getting new plants, and I think that that's kind of the whole thing. I'm definitely excited about shrimp and fish for sure, but it just takes me so long to get tired of a plant, or in comparison, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you know what I'm saying. I hope you know what I'm saying. I hope you get what I'm on about. But we have a new plant here, the Cryptocoryne Crispatula kubotai. Now, that's a tongue twister forever and a day. The Crispatula kubotai. So from here on out, I'm actually going to call it the Crypt kubotai because that's the variety of this. There is a little bit of confusion over the years. This plant was thrown in with Tokenensis, which actually comes from a different area of, it comes from China and not Thailand, is the really easy way to explain that. Tokenensis is actually a much wider leaf, a beautiful plant in its own right, but it's a much wider leaf as compared to the kubotai. It's actually a much thinner leaf. This is one of the red Cryptocoryne that you can find. It is super hard to find this plant in the United States. Europeans, you're probably going to have a lot more luck finding this plant for whatever reason. I can't explain it. I don't know why. But just the other day, my friend Tom Barr, I'm happy to say he's my friend. It's weird to meet somebody who is your hero, and then after years of just having a back and forth, eventually you can kind of just go like, yeah, I think Tom's my friend at this point. And that's really cool to have somebody that you look up to so much and then have met them and spent time with, you know what I mean? Like that's amazing. That's an amazing part of this hobby that I think gets overlooked very often, is that the community aspect of getting to know people, getting to meet people that I would consider to have a lot of admirable traits. It's so cool. Anyhow, enough gushing over Tom, but he got one of these plants in and he's been propagating them. Now, this isn't the easiest plant in the world to propagate because you actually have to kind of razor cut the stem propagation, cut the roots and all that stuff, which I will be doing a video about that in a couple of weeks because I currently have some plants that needs to be done to, and I'm going to lump them all together so you guys can get an opportunity to see what that's like with different plants and different varietals and kind of how you go about doing that. It's not as complicated once you get a hang of it, though it is sort of one of those, oh my God, I got to do surgery to my plants, you know, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. But he had a mother plant that had grown out and was doing really well, so he had posted it up for sale, and I was not really paying attention. He had posted it up and I was late to the game. Our boy Travis Greger out there in Minnesota had already claimed the one that had come up for sale super fast, which is not a bad deal because I buy plants from Travis also. He's a super collector like me, fantastic guy. I loved being at his house. Actually, there's a video of a short tour of one of his just amazing tanks. I have to admit, having toured Travis's place sort of affected my ideas with the 150, and I started kind of pursuing, I would say it's almost Travis Greger's style. You know, it's sort of that Dutch naturescape mix combination. I was like, I honestly felt like, man, that guy's kind of doing what I feel like I should be doing. And since then, I've just kind of been doing that with the 150. So I would say that Travis is the biggest influence on the 150 gallon here, which is coming along quite well. I'm really happy with it, and I'm just really packing it full of as many species as possible. Let's get back to the Cryptocoryne and talk about that a little bit, because I thought I wasn't going to be able to get this plant. Luckily, Tom messaged me and was like, wait a minute, did you want one too? He was like, I've got another one that I was thinking about selling. Luckily, I was like, oh yeah, man, I really want it. If you're willing to part with it, I want to get it. And Luckily, he was like, yeah, that's cool, man. I can send you this one. So we do have a mother plant here that, like I said, is going to split, but because it's a mother plant, Cryptocoryne species that is a little fickle because it needs a lot more light than your typical crypt needs. Most crypts can kind of be in obscure light and stuff like that. It doesn't need to be in the direct light, but this one actually does. You do need to make sure that you're getting a little direct light on this plant, or it is kind of stifle it out. So what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm going to plant it into the substrate temporarily. I'm kind of temporarily put it in there so that it has time to fully adapt to my water before I go splitting it. That kind of makes sense when you think about it. I don't want to go splitting a plant up and then putting it into an environment that it hasn't been in yet, and then just kind of crossing my fingers and going like, well, hopefully everything all split off here does well. Because in my experience over the years, some things have happened where I've taken a big mother plant, I've split it up and put it into a tank, and then all the ones that I split off ended up dying. I've also put a mother plant into a tank, and a lot of it melted back and receded and then had to regrow, right, before I was able to split it off, and that took a couple of months. So I kind of head that off at the pass now and allow it to adapt to my tank, in a temporary spot without splitting it, and I find that to sort of be the best way to go about, sort of doing this process now. So obviously the plant weights are going to come into effect because I'm not going to fully plant this plant. I don't want it to completely root, but I do want it to just kind of adapt to the water column. I don't want to leave it floating up at the surface, because typically what that'll do is draw the leaves out in a strange direction that we don't really want them to do. And then when we go to plant it, all the leaves are going to be going all wacky which way, and it's not going to be the best situation for us in that way. So we're going to use some plant weights. We're going to actually just plant the plant weights, push those down into the substrate, and just hold this place, the place for this plant. I do have some really cool Eriocallan in here that I will show you that I did the same thing with those, because I do want those to adapt to the water, allow anything to melt off, and get ready for splitting and planting. It's the same process with those, because they're just kind of such a delicate plant that just stuffing them into the substrate, or splitting them, stuffing them into the substrate, isn't going to be the best tactic for it in my experience, because that's what I try to help you guys out with. I try to help you with my experience, as opposed to just some nonsense that could or couldn't make sense to you. So this is pretty typical water parameters for a plant that's coming out of Thailand. We do want slightly soft water, not anything too crazy. We just want to have our pH be, 6.6 to 7.6, somewhere in that range. We also don't want it to be too super hot, so I wouldn't plan on going over 76 or 78 degrees, and I wouldn't plan on dropping down below 68 degrees. If you have a tank that's outside those parameters, I would probably consider putting this plant in a different tank, right? As I said, this plant is pretty dependent on a good amount of light. Doesn't need to necessarily be in the highlight, but it does need to be in an area that is well lit. So keep that in mind if you have space for it. Also, it's going to grow quite tall. It's going to grow quite tall and long and kind of spindly and do that effect. As I mentioned, it's also red leaves. Something that's kind of comparable that is a pretty common plant would be the Cryptocoryne balancea. If you have that in your aquarium and it's doing well, you're probably going to be fine. I wouldn't worry that much. CO2 is probably important in this instance because it is a red plant, which means more often than not, it has been cultivated to the point that it is going to grow red. So we do want to make sure that we have the best opportunity for this plant to grow. CO2 injection, I would say go ahead. Substrate, aqua soil is what I have been recommending to a lot of people out there, and this is no different. I would recommend some type of aqua soil if you can get it. ADA makes probably the most expensive one. Oliver Knott has a new one out, which I haven't tried yet, so don't quote me on that, but Oliver has told me that he's having pretty good success with his own brand, so take that as it may. I currently use the Fluval Stratum amended with a little ADA, of course, fertilizer for sure. I use the Easy Green fertilizer. It's my favorite one. It's that all-in-one comprehensive, and I am using Easy Iron also. The lighting I'm using on this tank is a Fluval 3.0 Fresh and Plant. It's 150 gallons. I have 2 of them on there. A lot of people continue to ask me, you know, how many lights for what size tank. I feel like one of these lights will do well on a 75. It's a 48-inch long one. Though I haven't personally tried a tank that small, which kind of sounds rude, but I haven't tried a tank that small with this light. So the smallest tank I have is a 60-gallon reef tank, but those are the reef lights. Those aren't the plant version. So as I mentioned, that I'm using the plant version of the Fluval 3.0 Fresh and Plant. It has like a million, the name is like 1,000,000 miles long. I am amending this water with a little bit of crushed coral in order to kind of, you know, give it a little boost of character, as I do have the guppies in here and stuff like that. So hopefully that gives you a comprehensive idea of what the setup is like, what the water parameters are, and all that kind of stuff. And we'll go ahead and get this planted in there, right? So thusly deemed the Crypt kubotai, right? As you can see, this is a really different kind of crypt that you're not going to normally see very often. It does have a little bit of melt happening already. Like you can see, this leaf is melted back right here. But if we look closely here, we can see we've got all these little separate plants that are growing in just one bunch, right? Which is going to come into play later down the road when I go ahead and trim this plant. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is bundle up these roots right here. Hopefully I can do this like underwater so you guys can see. I'm going to bundle up this little bit of root down here with a plant weight, and then I want to make sure that it actually sinks. Okay, so that's probably going to be just enough weight for it to allow it to kind of sink and just hang out in here for a little while. I have a plant right here that I'm doing the same thing, and its roots have actually reached down and got stuck into the substrate. But I'm doing the same thing with that plant right there, which came in a while ago and is about ready to trim. So we'll be doing a little feature video about that plant. But for right now, we're doing this. And I see that there's a little sprig of moss growing down here, which I don't want right there. So let me grab that while we're doing this video and get it out of there. It's my hand. I'm already wet, so I might as well do a little bit of work while I'm here. So we can take this plant and actually just push the roots down in just a tiny bit. Like, I'm not going crazy here or nothing, but I'm going to kind of leave it like that so that it's floating and it has time to kind of melt back and adapt to the water. I don't want to be able to just pull it out really easily. So I'm just going to leave it in there like that, and pretty basic, you know. I'm just going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to see how much like is adapting back and what's going to happen with it while it's in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and split it once it's time to split. This big fat root right here, that's a runner. It's pretty rare for this crypt to actually send out runners, but it does happen. So, you know, we do want to maintain that. I'm not going to trim that off. But I am super excited. Man, have to admit, I'm really excited to get this plant in. I had a buddy a long time ago that had this plant, and I never got any from him, which was lame. But awesome plant. Oh, I hope I can really get this one doing well and get it splitted, get a lot of it propagated so I can get it out in some tanks like, oh, I don't know, like Bentley Pasco's tanks, and a couple other locals, and then maybe see if I can't ship some out at some point. But such a cool crypt. I hope you guys like it. I like it. I think it's awesome. It's going to be a really cool addition to this tank and some other tanks too. Okay. Hey, if you like this video, smush the subscribe button. Just smush it with a little smushiness. I don't know. Everyone has to have some kind of like button catchphrase, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the join button, click the Patreon button, go over, join the community, become an Oceaneer, which is what we call ourselves around here. Let's do that, and then you won't like win an award or anything, but people will think you're cooler. How many people? I don't know. I would wager between 28 and 29 million. Seems reasonable, right? Later. I'm so excited to get this plant. I'm so excited my buns are all clenched up from the excitement.